Hello everyone and welcome back to another week on the Brush by Brandy YouTube channel. So this week we are going to be working on a beautiful French provincial piece of furniture. I love these, they're always popular and they tend to do really well for me, but this finish may look familiar because if you remember a couple weeks ago we did this finish on a bed and my customer liked it so much that she came back and asked for the matching finish on also this piece, which is going to serve as her dresser. So I think it's kind of cool that she liked her piece enough to actually want to do a matching piece for it. I can't wait till she gets them together in a room and can see what her vision is for this finish, but it's a really pretty classic finish. We're going to do kind of a cross-hatching technique, incorporate a little bit of metallics, some waxes, and it's going to take this French provincial piece up a notch. There's also going to be a little bit of surprise inside the doors. I always like to do this on pieces that have doors because it makes it kind of fun to open them up, and it's something that everyday people don't see, but you know it's in there waiting for you. So you guys stick around, enjoy this video, check out the one for the bed as well. That's also available here on my YouTube channel. Let's get started. Here's where I started on this piece. I picked this one up off my local Facebook marketplace. I usually try to snatch these whenever I can, and this one was actually in remarkably good condition. I started out by removing all the hardware and then I put those out to be cleaned and I gave the body a good cleaning. Now I'm going to go ahead and give this one 2 coats of Wisal primer in light gray. I'm really enjoying the Wisal primer because it is stain blocking and a gripping primer in one. So no matter what your problem is with the piece, you don't have to try to decide which type of primer you need the most. This covers all your bases. So I'm going to brush this on using one of my Klingon brushes, and I brush it on any which way just to get some coverage, and then I can come back with a light mist of water and clean up my brush strokes so they're all running in one direction. This is going to be the base for my paint coat, so I want to make sure that it's nice and smooth and gives me a clean finish to lay my paint on top of. This finish is going to have a lot of layers. Letting it dry for ends up being kind of interesting. It is going to have a lot of this light gray primer effect, but I still try to keep my this dry. I can go ahead and move along slightly on my next layer of paint. So I try to use it as an asset whenever I've got primer underneath. I choose the light gray primer. This comes in 4 colors. It comes in clear, white, dark gray, and light gray. And I tend towards the light gray most of the time because it covers all my bases. I can use it under whites and under colors, and it does great under both. With my primer complete, I'm going to go ahead and get started on my paint finish. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to apply a color wash. This is a dark charcoal gray that has some blue undertones in it. When I thin it out, you can really see those blue undertones. I'm going to add a lot of water to my surface, brush it on in kind of a thin coat, and then I'm going to use a rag to wipe it back. And I place my fingers on the rag so that when I wipe it, I pull with some finger marks so I get this sort of strié pattern in my paint finish. I find that doing this first layer as a color wash is just time saving. You could also do it by just brushing on some dry brush layers in your first color that adds some texture. That's all I'm trying to do is I'm going to start layering up the pattern and the texture. For my next layer, I'm coming back with a light medium blue color and I'm going to dry brush this in the same pattern as my strié into the dark blue. So at this point, I've got 3 layers of color going on. I've got the light gray, which is my primer. I've got the dark blue gray for my next color, and then my medium blue is my third color. And they start to layer up and create sort of a texture on top of each other. Every layer I do look for contrast. So I start with a light and then a dark and then a light and then a dark. I make sure that there's contrast in between each one so you can tell each layer apart. I started out with all my brush strokes going vertically, which was the same direction as my color wash, and now I'm going to add some horizontal strokes in to start creating this cross-hatching pattern. This crisscrossing is going to give me this sort of linen texture that adds a lot of interest to the final finish. I'm loading my brush very lightly, very little paint. It does mean that I need to refill it frequently, but that's okay. And then I'm just going to run it across my piece until I run out of paint on my brush, and then I'll go back to the well and refill it and keep doing the same thing over and over again until this entire side is covered. All right, moving on to my next layer. This layer is actually a little bit of my light blue mixed in with a white. So it's a very, very soft shade of pale blue, almost a white color. But again, I'm looking for that contrast in between each layer so these colors don't start to meld into each other. You can start seeing how this building up is creating all this interest. I'm going to keep doing this over and over with contrast between my layers and that cross-hatching technique, and each one is a build-up. You guys have seen me do this finish before, and there's a lot of brush strokes involved. That was why I tried to save time with the first coat by doing the color wash instead of using all the brush strokes. That's another option. You could just repeatedly do color washing and just add some brush strokes on your last steps, but I do like how the overall finish starts to build up with the texture. I moved the camera in a little bit closer so you can really see the texture here. You can see how it starts to build up, and each brush stroke layers on top of the other, and you start getting this woven look. It's kind of funny because the inconsistent brush strokes, by the time you do them over and over again, they start looking consistent after so many. This is one of those finishes you almost have to run your hand over. It ends up with this really even texture on it that does feel like a linen fabric. One difference I want to make note of in this finish is usually when I'm trying to get a smooth finish, I do a light sanding in between coats. On this one, I don't do any sanding in between coats because I actually want all those brush strokes to stay in my finish. The only one I sand before is after my final coat, before I put my clear coat on, just to make sure I don't have any really high abnormalities and knock those down. Let's do one last layer before I wrap this finish up. So this one I'm going to add in some streaks of a light beige color. I'm just going to use my brush and add these in kind of sporadically. I'm doing this because I do plan to incorporate a champagne metallic in this, and this is going to be kind of a base for those champagne metallic spots. Because the metallic doesn't get as much coverage, I'm going to put it over these spots of the beige paint. With my base done and all my cross-hatching finished, you can see how I've got all these layers of color, but it still looks a little bit messy. So this final step that I'm going to start working on here is what actually cleans it up and gives you this nice, smooth, even tonality overall. So what I'm using here is my medium blue color that also was included in my cross-hatching, and I'm also using a champagne metallic color. This metallic is from Modern Masters. Their metallics are beautiful. And this champagne color I'm going to layer over the top, only I'm going to add a little bit of water this time, and that sort of thins the paint out. It's going to add just a little subtle shimmer over some spots of my cross-hatching, but this is actually a color wash, and it tones down the colors underneath and kind of unifies them with a wash over top. I'm doing this wash over top using my medium blue color and also that champagne metallic. So you can see how that medium blue over top really softens all the cross hatching, but it still peeks through so you can see all the texture that I got with those brush strokes. They just have this evenness to them. The only difference between this coat and the cross hatching that's underneath is I'm using a lot of water to thin that paint out and let it be a little bit more even. There are some spots that I allow to be a little bit heavier and a little bit lighter, and then those spots of the champagne metallic are going to add that little bit of shimmer in the light. I love the contrast of the metallic paint against the flat chalky paint because it just adds these little spots that catch your eye. I feel like these French provincial pieces are perfect for this finish because it's got a softness to it in the end. And the French provincial pieces have these curvy legs, so I feel like anything curvy should have these soft, romantic feeling finishes to them, and this one is exactly that. You can kind of envision this piece along with the bed that I showed you in the intro, even though they're not an original match set. In fact, they're made decades apart, but they've both got a lot of these sweeping and curving details that'll make them fit perfectly together. So remember that I told you that I like to hide some details inside anytime I've got these cabinets that have doors on them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a pretty paper that coordinates with my finish on the outside, but is a nice subtle detail to the inside. This decoupage paper that I'm going to use is from Recycled, and I think this pattern is perfect. It's just got a subtle amount of color. It's got the same sweeping lines as my furniture piece, so it's definitely inspired by the overall look that I'm going for this bedroom set. I applied a thin layer of wallpaper paste to the inside of my cabinet. It does have a base of paint underneath, and that's because papers can be semi-translucent, so with that base of paint, you won't see through to the wood underneath. To lay my paper, I found the 90-degree corner in this top corner, and then I'm going to use this decoupage tool to lay the paper out. I'm going to work it slowly down the piece, working out the bubbles towards the edge as I go. My piece of paper is just slightly larger than my door, and when I'm done laying this decoupage, I'll come back with a sanding sponge and trim that off, so I don't worry about that just yet. This paper is really nice to work with. It's a thin, almost tissue paper consistency, but it's fairly workable. You want to make sure that you don't over rub over the top. You can cause tearing, and so to prevent that, if you need to do extra rubbing, I do recommend you just place a piece of parchment in between your tool. You can also use a piece of saran wrap, a piece of cloth, anything that keeps you from having friction on top of the paper. So you can see what I did there. I just took a sanding sponge and I rubbed it in one direction. I don't use a sawing motion because that sawing motion can cause your paper to lift as you rub it the other direction. So I just rub it one direction along the edge of my paper, and that gives me a nice clean edge on my door. Once this is dry, I'll come back and paint the edges of my door to match my body. We are getting to some finishing touches, you guys, on this piece, and one of those is some waxwork. I love doing waxwork. Working in wax is one of my favorite mediums. It reminds me of oil pastels, and that's because it's got this soft, creamy texture that gives you these smeary, smudgy looks. It adds a lot of romanticism to the piece. So I have not sealed this piece, and I'm coming back with a little bit of black wax and a soft brush, and I'm just going to smudge out these edges. I'm adding the black wax to any areas that I want to look deeper and darker than the rest of the body. So I added it along all the molding on the doors and then just to the edges of my drawers. The wax is going to catch into some of the details of my paint finish and kind of emphasizes those, but it just gives a little bit of shadowing to some of these corners. Next, I'm going to add some gilding wax to just the details on this piece. So this molding is perfect. I'm just applying it with my finger. This is a decor wax from Redesign with Prima, and this color is called Eternal. It's probably one of the most used products in my stash by far. I love this wax. It's the perfect texture and softness. It applies very easily, and it dries permanent after 24 hours. So now I'm ready to go ahead and seal this piece, and I'm going to wipe on some clear coat. I'm just wiping it on using a sponge. I am going to do 2 coats of my clear over the body, and then I usually do 3 or 4 onto the top because that is the most used part of the piece. I wipe it onto the faces of my doors and drawers first, and then I'm going to pull them out slightly, and I'll wipe around all of the edges, and then I pull the drawer and get inside the body as well, so the entire piece is sealed. I decided to go ahead and wipe my clear coat on here. I do usually spray them, but I wanted to show you that you can wipe on a clear coat with a sponge as well. I am going to seal over the top of my wax detailing and those gilding wax details as well. I find that once I buff them away and there's minimal left on the surface, I can seal them no problem. At this point, my hardware was also nice and clean, so I pulled that out. I didn't scrub it down all the way to the original color. I left a little bit of the patina color for this finish, and then I added a little bit of my gold gilding wax over top and attached those back onto my body, and this piece is finished. Look at that paper on the inside. It's probably one of my favorite details. For my staging, I just added a little bit of art that matched with my metallic color, a little bit of flowers, and some blue glass that ties in with the blue body, and this piece is complete. You guys can find links for everything I use in the description for this post. You can find more Brush by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and on my website at brushbybrandy.com. I hope you'll click that subscribe button if you enjoyed this video.